Hey guys, welcome back to my channel, The Crafting Chicken. My name is Shannon and in this week's video we're going to be making some nerikomi buttons. I've been working on a knitted cardigan, like a little waistcoat, and it called for some buttons, so I thought it would be fun to try and make some buttons that are a similar colour to the wool I have. This technique also leaves you with quite a lot of offcuts, and I didn't want to waste these, so I also experimented with incorporating the scraps into wheel thrown pieces, so that was really fun, so stay tuned for that if you're interested. Nerikomi is a Japanese pottery technique where you layer different coloured clays to create a pattern. So in this case I'm just doing stripes, but there are lots of really cool nerikomi artists out there who make really intricate patterns, and it's so cool. I'm going to link one guy in particular who I follow on Instagram whose nerikomi pots are just amazing. So much detail, it must take so much planning. Really amazing stuff. So the grey coloured clay is my standard clay that I use, and it fires a really lovely buff colour with speckles in. So I'm using that clay along with some clay that I've stained. My buff clay overlapped the coloured clay a little bit, and this interfered with the striped pattern. I didn't really mind because I was just cutting out little circles, but I think if you wanted a really precise stripe, you'd want to cut off the edges to make it a really nice sharp block rather than having that grey overlap the blue, if that makes sense. So then I just started compressing the layers together by slamming the block onto each side and kind of giving it some smacks. Because my clay was quite wet, I found that this stuck the layers together really well. If your clay was maybe a little bit on the drier side, you might want to put some slip between each layer to get them to stick. And basically you just want to keep compressing it. This is going to get the layers nice and thin. After I'd compressed it quite a lot, I then just got it into a nice rectangular shape again. And then you can see here I was just checking which way to cut it, because I once cut it on the long edge, which was wrong. So you want to cut it like this, so in half on the shorter width. And then you want to stack one section on top of the other section, and then you can start compressing again. So just slamming into the workbench, making sure they get nice and compressed together, and like the more times you cut it in half and compress it, the thinner your stripes are going to be. So I just repeated this step like maybe 3 or 4 times, I think I did in the end, to get some nice thin stripes. Cool, so now it's time to cut a layer and see these stripes. I'm just using my rolling pin guides to cut a nice thin layer. That was me crossing my fingers for some nice stripes. So you can see I kind of almost get like a square pattern, and I'm pretty sure it's because I had those overlapping like buff clay parts. But yeah, like I said earlier, because I'm cutting circles out of it, I can kind of pick the pieces that I want anyway. So that first piece you can't really use for the buttons because the underneath side is really smushed. So I then just cut another piece, and this side has got nice stripes on both sides, so that's good for buttons. So here you can see the nerikomi stripes, really cool. So to make the buttons, I'm just taking some round cookie cutters and cutting out the buttons. In hindsight, I wish I'd waited until this slab had got a little bit firmer. I did it pretty much straight away, so the clay is still quite wet, and as I was pushing out the buttons, it was marking it a little bit. It was fine in the end because you can kind of sand it out when they're at the bisque stage, but I think if I'd have just let it dry a little bit, I could have avoided that. So you can see here, to get the buttons out, I was just using the end of a tool and pushing the clay through. To get them flat again, I just used the rolling pin guide and just gave them a little tap, and then I just made sure to dry them between boards so that they couldn't kind of curl up as they dried. And then we go again. So that was a kind of like a turquoisey colored clay I used, and then this time I'm now using a brown clay, and I also used like a lovely cobalt blue clay as well. As you can see, there are quite a lot of scraps that come with nerikomi, so I wanted to try and incorporate these into a wheel thrown piece to use them up. As I was just kind of experimenting with this, I didn't bother weighing out the clay, I just took some random chunks to use, and I haven't ever tried attaching a scrap of clay onto a wheel thrown pot before, so I just kind of tried some different techniques to try and find out what worked best. So for this first pot, I just threw it like normal, so centered it, opened it up, pulled the walls all the way, and then attached the nerikomi. So I took the nerikomi scraps and cut them into smaller pieces. It was quite cool actually because of how the buttons were cut out. It leaves almost like a star shape in the middle, so that was quite fun. And I was hoping I'd still be able to see the star shape once I'd kind of compressed it all. So I just tried to evenly stick the pieces all the way around the pot. And then I wasn't 100% sure what would be the best technique, so I tried out this roller first, which I didn't like. It didn't work very well. So then I tried out a metal rib, and I'm just kind of holding the rib steady and pushing the clay out into the rib from the inside and trying to compress it all together and get everything nice and flush, so that the nerikomi looks like it's part of the pot and not just stuck on the top, if that makes sense. I found this technique didn't work very well, so because the walls of the pot were already quite thin, trying to add in that nerikomi just it messed up the walls basically. So you can watch me here just trying a few different techniques to try and get the shape back while still compressing the nerikomi into the pot. This technique didn't work very well, but I'll let you kind of watch what I try and do to fix it. At this point, the clay has like been worked too much and it just wasn't going well, but I carried on for some reason. And yeah, you can see here the rim just completely folded in on itself, and I thought it looked quite cool, and I considered keeping it like this, but then I realized to get the nerikomi pattern to come back, you have to trim it, and it would obviously be really hard to trim with those folds in it, so I just tried to get them back out again. I think I was really just messing around with it at this point. It obviously wasn't salvageable, but for some reason I was still trying to salvage it. In the end, I cut off the top section and made it into a cute little cup. Okay, so for this next pot, I decided to only pull up the wall twice and leave it quite thick so that when I then attached the nerikomi, I could do a pull through the whole thing, and I found that really worked a lot better. So I stuck on the nerikomi pieces again I really made sure to press them into the clay before I started this time as well, just so then there's a little less work to do with the rib. So like with the previous pot, I compressed it first and I started with a sponge this time just to see what that did. And I liked it quite a lot actually. That pressed it in quite nicely without it catching. Then I switched to a metal rib and just got those pieces really pushed in, and I found it didn't deform the walls this time because the clay was already thicker. They kind of could stand up to the stress a little bit more. I was going to do a pull here, but then realised there's like a little lump at the bottom that wasn't fully compressed in, so I just went back in, compressed that, and then I did a pull through the whole thing. I wasn't sure whether this would distort the nerikomi or not, so again, this is very much an experiment. But it did get the whole pot really nice and smooth, and you couldn't tell the nerikomi was stuck on anymore, as you can see by my happy face. For the next pot, I did the same thing as before, and I just pulled up 2 small times so that the walls were quite thick. And then I wanted to try using one of the bigger slab offcuts. So the first piece of nerikomi that is only really one-sided because the outer edge gets really messed up and doesn't work for something like buttons that are double-sided. I wanted to use some of that. So I took a long strip and wrapped it around the pot just to see what that would look like. Again, I just gave it a bit of a press onto the pot before I started the wheel spinning. And then I went back in with my sponge, but as you can see it started to peel up a little bit, so I just went back in and really tried to squish it in a bit more. And then I just started the wheel and like gently compressed it for a little while until it started to get more squished in, and then I carried on with the method I used before. And so I really like the outcome of this, but it did obviously make one side a lot thicker than the other. So it was very much a wonky pot, but I've been using this cup and I really love it. Okay, so now we're back to the buttons. I left them to dry out overnight just until they got to leather hard between these boards. And I bought myself a little mini handheld drill. I thought the idea of hand twisting loads of holes into these buttons was going to take a long time and also hurt my hands. So yeah, I just got this little mini drill and it worked really well. So here are all the buttons. You can see they're quite smudged, but I was hoping once it got to the bisque stage, I'd be able to sand them and then the pattern would emerge again. So I just kind of went around and neatened up all the edges, gave them a little roll to get them nice and round. And then I got my drill and it was really easy. I just used one of the smallest drill bits and just drilled a little hole. Some of them I tried out 4 holes just to see what that would be like. And as well as the nerikomi buttons, I also made some really cute little pressed flower buttons. So I just took some dried, I think they're called baby's breath flowers, and just rolled them into the clay and they looked really sweet. Once I'd made a few holes, I realized I could use that as a guide to get the holes in the same place on the other buttons. So I just poked a little mark with the pin tool. Here's a close-up of the drill. Obviously, please be careful if you're going to do this yourself. I was making sure to put my fingers like either side of where the drill was going to come out, and obviously just wasn't going very fast either so that it couldn't hurt me. But please be careful of your fingers, guys, if you're going to do this. I then just went around and scraped all of the holes just to make sure that they laid nice and flat, and I used this little wooden tool to get the holes nice and round as well and nice and neat. It was also time to trim the nerikomi pots. So this is the first cup I made. the really wonky one on the inside. I like to trim my pots by just centering them, sticking them down with some lumps of clay, and then trimming away. Guys, I'm so sad. I'd made the base too thin, and then when I pushed on it to trim the top, it just went all the way through. And I was so sad because the pattern looked really cool on this one as well. There was little patches of nerikomi, and I just loved it so much. It was going to be my new matcha cup, but it's fine. This other really wonky cup also turned out really cool. It's just super wonky, but it's fine. It still works. It was a little bit tricky to trim. You can obviously see one side is way thicker. That's because I used the slab. And I only had enough to go around like half the cup. I think if I had a slab that obviously went the whole way around, it would make it less wonky. But it's part of the charm, it's part of the quirk. I trimmed a foot into this one as well, and was just extra careful not to go too thin. Okay, so here's my little pot that I'm so sad about because it was so cute as well. This is literally what I pictured, a pot with just random little spots of nerikomi. I think it looks so cool, like this bit where the like nerikomi blends into the pot because it's the same kind of background color. So cool. So yeah, I definitely want to make more nerikomi cups. I think they're so fun. They're lovely to hold. I love a nerikomi cup. So this is the one that had the slab. So the really wonky one, but I still love it. I literally just had a matcha out of it earlier. So cute. So this one, I think I trimmed a little bit too much. So that part looks so cool. Like I love that. But then this was the one that had the kind of star shapes. And you can see they kind of just turned into little tiny blobs because I just took way too much off. So I don't think a shape like this works so well because to get that nice roundness, I felt like I had to trim quite a bit and then you lose the nerikomi. So I feel like a straight up part works best. I feel like I did the opposite on this one. So you can see all the patches are still like very much like solid brown. I think if I'd trimmed a little bit more, it would have maybe become nerikomi like this little patch here. But because of the shape I went for some reason, it just made it hard to trim. And yeah, so I think maybe just little nerikomi cups would be perfect. So here are my buttons in the kiln, and here they are bisque fired. I made this little contraption to make it easier to sand them in, so I can hold on to the side panels and just sand it without having to like try and grip onto the button itself. And I made sure to sand outside so that I didn't breathe in any of the silica particles. So just make sure if you're sanding indoors to wear a really good mask, one that definitely like filters out tiny little silica particles like this. And you can see the stripes become more like sharp. I probably could have done with sanding it even more, but it was a really hot day and I wanted to get them glazed so I could see what they look like. I then just gave them a little sponge down just to get any of the dust off before I glazed them. I think it's so cool seeing them dry and then wet. The colour like really pops. And then I thought I would just show you what I did for these little pressed flower buttons as well. I bought one of these Amico watercolour palettes and you literally just use them like watercolours. So I get a little bit of water on the brush and then dab it on the colour, and then I kind of just went a bit messy with it, got it all into the grooves, and then I sponged it back to leave it just in the impressions. Glazing these was really simple. I just gave it a quick dunk in some clear glaze and that was it. And here they are fired. I think the colours look amazing. Like once you've got that clear glaze on, the colours pop so well. The stripes are just so cute. I'm definitely going to make more of these buttons. So here's my cardigan, and I wasn't sure which buttons to pick, but in the end I think these ones worked best with the colours in the wool. I'm really pleased. This is my first like big knitting project. I've done loads of hats and things. This is my first piece that I can actually wear, and it's got my little buttons on, so it's extra special. And then I thought I would just show you me making a little matcha with my new nerikomi cup. So now it's fired. Isn't that so cool with the stripes? I love it so much. And I'm using my little matcha set that I made. I actually have these available on my Etsy store. They're made to order, so if you fancy having your own special handmade ceramic matcha set, then maybe check out my Etsy store. I'd really appreciate it. That'd be so cool. matcha green looks so pretty in a handmade cup. Like, it just works so perfectly together. Thank you so much for watching, guys. I really hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you next time. Bye!